Chag Sameach, everybody. Welcome to my sukkah. We have a little simcha spacious shueva going, a little music. How is everybody? Sure, you have a sukkah in Sedona? Hi, Lorette. Welcome. L'chaim to everybody. Zman simchasteinu. We're supposed to say l'chaim in our sukkahs. I'm just going to get my papers together. Terry, did you get my message about coming to my sukkah? I'm going to make a public announcement about everybody coming to my sukkah. Okay, we're going to start in 2 minutes. Just want to open my books. If you can hear this music, it's beautiful. It's by a group named Zusha from New York. Hi, Sarah Lydia from Yerushalayim. Okay, I think we're ready. Hi, Barb. Wow. Little music for our musicians. Cinderella, don't say anything funny, okay? Okay. So I want to welcome everybody to my sukkah. We're going to wait like a few more minutes. We'll wait a few more minutes to start. So I would show you my sukkah, but once I take my camera and move it around the room, I don't know what will happen. But I want to see if you notice my decorative touch. I did that for Cindy. Put a little color in my sukkah. Miranda, welcome. Really, it's so nice to have everybody here at Sukkah's. Jill. Wow. It's a beautiful night here in Los Angeles. We're very lucky. We're not sitting in the snow. We're not sitting in the rain. And I had wonderful guests this week. I had one of my sons from New York came with 2 of his children. And they enjoyed not only the weather, and we had guests. And, you know, during this time, we used to always have a big sukkah party. Hi, Fran, welcome. So we would have a big sukkah party, and we call it sushi in the sukkah. So whenever you have Jews and you serve sushi, it's a guaranteed win-win situation for some reason. And you get a lot of people to come. So we would have like 500 people in a sukkah. And there were many people who had never been in a sukkah before. People who it was really their first time dwelling in a sukkah, having something to eat in a sukkah. And that happened to us this year also. I don't know if you could see the size of my sukkah, but I fit 3, you can't because you can only see me sitting in this direction and if I move it around, but I fit 3 tables in here. And I had 10 people all together, including my son, his kids, Kobe, me, and a few guests. And we had people who actually had never eaten in a sukkah before, who really, it was quite exciting and quite thrilling to as well as people who have been in a sukkah but hadn't yet this sukkahs. And so I just want to start off, and I will make the announcement in the middle and at the end. For anybody that lives in Los Angeles, Thursday and Friday, I am planning to be home all day. And if there's anybody who hasn't been in a sukkah yet and would like to come and have like a little piece of honey cake in the sukkah and shake the lulav and esrog, you can email me at olivia@highcenter.org, or if you have my phone number, text me that you want to come, and I'll make a time slot so that people who feel uncomfortable and want to just be here by themselves or with another person, I won't have a crowd here. I mean, I'll have maybe 3 people at a time, something like that. So if you live in Los Angeles and you would like to come on Thursday or Friday, anytime during the day, before the holiday starts Friday night, please email me, olivia@highcenter.org, and I will give you a time slot. We can make a mutually agreeable time slot, and you could come and you could have the opportunity this year to say a blessing in the sukkah. So I want to start off with something. First of all, I want to say l'chaim. Okay, now this is legitimate because you're supposed to have l'chaims in the sukkah. You're supposed to have a glass of wine in the sukkah. This is my Sheva Chaya glass from Succot. And if anybody would like any, I have now 2 grandchildren that are in Succot and another one on the way to study this year. And we could just start shipping these Sheva Chaya glasses here to Los Angeles, and you could join me and say l'chaim anytime class starts. And I also want to say l'chaim to Lisa Toffler, who probably is not watching because she is a policewoman who guards us and gets up at 4 in the morning. But this class on Wednesday nights has been in Lisa's house for many, many years, and we've only moved it to Facebook during the Corona time. And she's always, and I have to say to Lisa's credit, all the time she would sneak in like a video and a FaceTime, and sometimes put it on FaceTime, really wanting to make the class more public, and I was more hesitant. But so I want to thank Lisa. She always opened her home, and now instead of like the 10 people that came, there are multiples of that amount. So l'chaim, and Lisa and her family should be blessed. And she has a daughter also in Israel, and a daughter who also is going into the IDF, like my beautiful grandson Ari, who spent Yom Kippur in Hebron protecting us. And so l'chaim, it's called Zman Simchasenu. It's the time of our rejoicing. So l'chaim. So I want to start with a story. The story I was going to tell in the middle of the teaching, but I'm pulling it out now for a certain reason. And it's a story about Ahavas Yisrael. So the whole purpose of sitting in the sukkah, and the purpose of the shaking of the lulav, and the 4 different types of lulav, are 4 different types of species. The lulav, the esrog, the willow, and the myrtle are about unity. It's about unity among Jews, and it's about love one for the other, about Ahavas Yisrael, how we all have to be united. Like last week in class, we learned that when you shake the lulav in different directions, for instance, to the south, to the north, forward, it's about uniting. It's about drawing our hearts together, all together, in kindness and love with each other. So I want to bring in something about Ahavas Yisrael, and this is a story that was told by the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he said there was a certain rabbi, and that his child fell ill, and he was crying and crying bitterly. And later on, after his child recovered, and he was examining himself, he realized that his spiritual growth and his spiritual work weren't at the level it should be, because he said that when he considered somebody else's child, he didn't feel that bitterness of cry, that bitterness of that sorrow that he felt when his own child was ill. And he said it proved to him that his avoda, meaning his spiritual work, was in its preliminary stage and hadn't yet reached a level that would have revealed the essence of his soul, where he would have felt the pain of another Jew. That's what it means, Ahavas Yisrael, and being united. So I just want to share a personal experience that happened to me this week. You're instead of my therapist. No, I'm recovered. That's why I'm having a lot of l'chaims. So our oldest daughter, Hanala, was hospitalized this week. Not for COVID. She had an infection from a skin infection. And she was in a hospital where They did not allow any visitors, and there was basically no communication. And without having to go into the gory details, if anybody wants to be my therapist later, you can call me up and I can share it with you. But it was really one of the most frustrating experiences. It was a frustrating experience. It was a frustrating experience to try to get through to the switchboard, which the phone would disconnect 8 times in a row. It was a frustrating experience leaving about 25 messages for somebody to call back. It was a frustrating experience not knowing she is severely handicapped, if she was eating, if she wasn't eating, if anybody knew she was there. And during the time of Corona, especially in New York, when all the patients were taken to hospitals and people were talking about that they weren't able to be in touch with their loved ones, and they didn't know, were they eating, weren't they eating, were they being treated, weren't they being treated. And I really didn't get, I felt bad about it, but I never understood the depth of what that meant until that same thing happened to me. That not being able to know and that not being able to be in touch. And I really thought about this story that, when it happens to you, the pain of it and the agony, you take it into your heart and soul. But Ahavas Yisrael means we feel that for other people also, that we want to be united. We want to be one. We want to support each other. And I remember once being with Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, and I was taking him, picked him up from where he was staying, probably the Ritchie family, and I was taking him to my house for breakfast, and we were driving on Santa Monica Boulevard, which is like an 8 lanes. It's 4 lanes in each direction, and we stopped at a red light. And starting to cross the street was one of the most broken human beings that I have ever seen. I didn't know if it was a man, if it was a woman, pushing a shopping cart, walking at a snail's pace, covered in rags, just starting to walk from the one curb very slowly across the street. And Shlomo Carlebach put his hands over his heart, and he watched that person. Every footstep, he was going, oi, oi. And you could feel him feel that pain of the other person. So I took it to myself that, everything that comes before us, the Baal Shem Tov says, is divine providence. And in this time, of maybe we are lucky enough not to be suffering on the level that other people are suffering on, but we certainly can have a deeper feeling and a deeper experience of how we can support each other, and how important it is to feel that our hearts are united and that we're there for each other, really. So that was my lesson for this week, and Baruch Hashem, it all turned out well, and we broke her out of prison, and it's all over. So, really, for everybody, I want to dedicate the class tonight. For everybody who needs a healing should have a healing. And for my dear, dear friend, Baruch Nachshon, Raphael Baruch Ben Leah, that he should have a complete healing immediately, and the whole world should have a healing, that this virus be over, that the divisiveness that's happening to people, the brokenness that's happening to people, the anti-Semitism that is rearing its head in many, many places, all of this should be healed immediately before Simchas Torah, because we have to dance. The mitzvah, the commandment of Simchas Torah is dancing, and I have a lot of beautiful stories to share about that. And I just want to say that there's a holy brother. His name is Shlomo Katz, and he's on Facebook, and he has the Shlomo Katz Project. And he lives in Eretz Yisrael, and he used to live in Los Angeles, and probably everybody from Los Angeles knows him. And maybe other people around the world know him, and if you don't know him, you should know him. but he's been having a sukkahs every day of sukkahs. He's been having classes every day, and at night he's been having what we call Simchas Beis HaShueva, the celebrations at night with music and teachers. And tomorrow morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Israel time, but 6 a.m. Los Angeles time, my fabulous daughter, Hindala Swirlov, is going to be the teacher. So you can set your alarm with me and be up and listen to her teach. She's fabulous, and she's part of the Simcha coming out of Jerusalem. So again, before I started teaching, I want to invite everybody who is watching in Los Angeles, who has not been yet in a sukkah and would like to be in one in the next 2 days, please to email me, olivia@highcenter.org, and we will make a time for you to come to be in my sukkah, to shake the lulav, and to have a piece of honey cake. Not homemade, okay, sorry. Okay, so I want to start, we're going to build up to Simchas Torah. We're in the middle of Sukkot, and that is why we're having the class tonight in the sukkah, because it says that for the whole week of Sukkot, we're supposed to move out of our homes, and we're supposed to, whatever we do in our homes, we're supposed to be doing in the sukkah. And we have classes in the sukkah, we have meals in the sukkah. You want to socialize in the sukkah, you want to be on your iPhone, be on it in the sukkah, read whatever it is to spend the time in the sukkah. And it's very precious. It's very, very special, and it's very beautiful. And so I encourage everybody, if you don't have your own sukkah this year, that next year you will have one. So the sukkah is also compared to a mikveh. So when you immerse in a mikveh, it's like returning to the womb, and you purify. There's a level of spiritual self-nullification and spiritual purity. And the waters of a mikveh are called living waters, Mayim Chayim. They're called living waters. And that there's this feeling when you're in the mikveh of being surrounded. You're like when we're in the sukkah, we're surrounded by the mitzvah. But when you're in the mikveh, you're surrounded by this level of pure spiritual light that envelops us and cleanses us both physically and spiritually. And this is the same effect that living in the sukkah for the entire week is, because we bask in what we call the clouds of glory, the clouds that traveled with us when we traveled for 40 years in the desert, and it enabled us to become nullified in the presence of God. And the word sukkah begins with the letter samach, which equals 60, which is connected. Remember last week we talked about it. There were 60 blasts of tekiah from the shofar that was connected to the word schach. Schach was 60. The letter samach is 60. The letter kaf and kaf both are 20. So it was the 60 blasts of tekiah, the 20 blasts of shvarim, and the 20 blasts of trua that made up the 100 blasts of the shofar, and that is directly connected to the sukkah. And the sukkah is like a mikveh of joy. Isn't that just beautiful? It's just like a mikveh of joy. And I want to just say that a lot of the teaching I'm doing tonight, besides being from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, is from this book. It's called Seasons of the Soul. And it's a compilation from Rabbi Avram Aryeh Trugman. And I just want to say that Avram Aryeh Trugman and I used to have a vegetable garden together, a very large organic vegetable garden together on Har Zion in Jerusalem. And he and his wife married, and I did the cooking for their wedding. And the whole thing cost $360. And every summer, they live in Moshav Modi'in. And every summer they spend 2 weeks vacation up in Sfat, and we always get to be together in Sfat in the summer, and we go walking together. And Avram Aryeh has been a big push for me to write my book. And so this is a book he put together. He's a student of Rabbi Yitzhak Ginsburg's and a wonderful teacher. So many of the things I'm going to be teaching from tonight are going to be from his book. Okay, so we also have during this week something that we call Simchas Beis HaShueva. We did not talk about it last week. That's what we're doing tonight when we're saying L'chaim, and I had this beautiful music on. So we want to bring joy. We want to do things that are going to raise our level of joy. I saw that I got a text from the La Brea community that they're having Simchas Beis HaShueva. So it used to be that there would be bands on street corners, and everybody would come out to a street, and there'd be this wonderful music, and people would be singing and dancing and food, etc., etc. But now we can't do that. So what they're doing tonight is they have a band, and they have fabulous musicians, and they're going block to block. So they sent out notices, 7 to 7:30 we're going to be on this block, and 7:30 to 8 we're going to be on this block. And somebody sent me a clip from their block, and it was beautiful. They have truck and music and, like a few people dancing, and to keep up the simcha, to keep up the joy. So this is our responsibility during this time. How do we put ourselves in joy when some of us are sitting by ourselves alone? Like, here I am alone in my sukkah. Well, I'm not alone. You guys are with me. But some people are truly alone. So how do you move yourself to joy? It's a great question. It's a rhetorical question. Okay, anybody? If you send in an answer, you might get a free Shabbos dinner. I mean, you definitely will get a free Shabbos dinner, not a might. So it says that the Simchas Beis HaShueva included a lot of music, and that the mystics through the ages have understood the unique ability of music to create a spiritual atmosphere and to put people into a meditative state of consciousness. It's very interesting because in the story of the Megillah, in the story of Purim, when Ahasuerus makes a feast, and he invites, all the 127 countries of all the land and all the people, and then the people of Shushan. It says that the feast satisfied 4 of the 5 senses. And the only sense that it did not satisfy, that it did not address, was the sense of hearing. Why? Because it says, if you hear music that you don't like, it can make your evening quite unpleasant. I'm sure everybody has had that experience. I went to a mini Burning Man, not last year, because this year it was closed, but in the years before, and some of that music, it was quite unpleasant if it's music you don't like. Or music has an ability to raise you to a spiritual level, that sometimes you hear music that just takes your soul and lifts it up to the highest place. So the Feast of Ahasuerus didn't contain music, because music does have this ability to elevate you in a deeply meditative way. And it says also that this music is connected to prophecy. And that how is a state of prophecy achieved? It's achieved through joy. So there is an essential connection between prophecy and music, and that can awaken the soul. That music can awaken the soul. And you see these great concerts and these deep movements of music that have an ability to touch people on a very profound level. So in the Mishnah, it describes what we call the Simchas Beis HaShueva, the water drawing ceremony, and it took place in the Holy Temple every Succot. And there was joyous music and song that was played, and water was drawn in a very festive way every day. We're not going to go into the details, but certainly, if you would like, go on Chabad.org and read up on it. It's fascinating. So there was a great procession. The water was drawn, and there was a great procession with music and dancing, and they came to the temple. And in the morning, this water was poured on the altar, and it symbolized people praying for rain and sustenance. And that throughout the evening, it says the great sages would lead in song and dance and praising God through music, with the accompaniment of the Levites and numerous different instruments. It says that they were too numerous to count. And the Mishnah also says that anyone who has not seen Simchas Beis HaShueva has never really seen true joy. So it also appears that the water was the joy. There was the joy not only in the pouring of the water, but there was the joy in the drawing of the water. And it says not only was water drawn, but prophecy was drawn and joy was drawn at the same time. And it says the prophet Jonah received prophecy during one of these Sukkot celebrations. So we're just going to move a little forward with the celebration to water, to the symbol of water, and how it weaves its way into the month of Elul, the month of Tishrei, and into the time of Sukkot. And I have to say, I love water. I run women's spiritual retreats down in Desert Hot Springs. I only do my retreats where there's mineral water. I do them in Israel where there's mineral water. And hopefully, I'm going to say l'chaim to it because I want it to happen soon. Hopefully, we will be able to do all of this again very soon. There's nothing like soaking in this enveloping mineral water and learning Torah that opens one's heart and soul. So in Elul, we start off with Elul, with water, and it says that slowly, more and more water comes into play as the months continue. And in preparation for Rosh Hashanah, we have the prayers of Succot. And the central prayer in the prayers of Succot are the 13 attributes of mercy, the 13 attributes of compassion. It says that were revealed to God by God to Moses after the sin of the golden calf as a process of the forgiveness to the Jewish people. And what do these 13 attributes have to do with water? Good question. Okay, so it says the 13th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the letter Mem, and the word for water is spelled Mem, Yud, Mem, Mayim. So there's an energetic connection between the element of water and the 13th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is Mem. A mikvah also begins with the letter Mem, and it's a body of living water. A mikvah must be flowing living water, which takes out all spiritual impurities. And it also, the mikveh to be correct according to Jewish law, has to be the measurement of 40 seahs of water. This is the minimal measurement that's necessary to cover a person's body. And guess what? You're not going to be surprised. The letter Mem equals, numerically, is 40, represents 40. And what else do we know about 40? 40 is a letter of transformation. It's the number of weeks of pregnancy. And the letter Mem is shaped like a closed container, like a pool of sorts, like it's womb-like. That's the look of the letter Mem. And the letter Mem represents a mikvah. So it brings together this idea of water, immersion, cleansing. And what do we know about those three things? They're transformational in the concept of tshuva. And what is the primary theme of the 13 attributes of mercy? It is tshuva, return. Also in Kabbalah, the 13 attributes are compared to channels of light, healing, and forgiveness that flow like a stream from above to below. And it says that, so we can envision, if you want to meditate on these 13 attributes, that the water is a medium that they flow down from the higher worlds into our world. And what do we know about Rosh Hashanah? There is a water ceremony. It's called Tashlik, where we go to a water and we symbolically empty our pockets of sins, and it is a communal ceremony mostly. And there's some I remember seeing this beautiful painting in Russia of people standing around a lake, doing Tashlik ceremony. On Yom Kippur, it is a custom for everyone to immerse in a mikvah the day of before the day that of Kol Nidre. It is a Jewish custom. The mikvahs are open for men and women to immerse in the waters or dip in the ocean. That's also good. And it says that it affects your heart, your mind, your soul, your body, that spiritual immersion. And again, we said a kosher mikvah has to be the measurement of 40 seahs, and Yom Kippur is the 40th day from Rosh Chodesh Elul. And from Rosh Chodesh Elul is when we begin this process of tshuva and renewal. And we know that Moses ascended Mount Sinai on Rosh Chodesh Elul for the third time, and the last 40-day period, and he came down to the people with the tablets on Yom Kippur. So we see this number 40 becoming very prevalent in many things. And also, one of the central focuses of the prayers of Yom Kippur is during Musaf. And what is that prayer about? It's about the high priest performing his service. So he immersed in a mikveh 5 times. And these 5 immersions correspond to the 5 different prayers the 5 different services that we have on Yom Kippur, as well as there are 5 physical pleasures that we refrain from on Yom Kippur: eating and drinking, bathing, wearing leather shoes, anointing with oils, and marital intimacy. And also there's this cleansing and purification level of the 5 levels of the soul. So you can see how intertwined, and each of these we can spend so much time talking about, but we want to get to the fun dancing part, okay? So it says, one of the most important verses in the Yom Kippur service is said by the prophet Ezekiel, I will pour over you waters of purification, which means atonement, forgiveness, purification. And also, again, the holiday of Sukkot, water is an essential and a major factor in the Simchas Shueva and also in the prayer for rain. So that we're praying for rain because rain is representing our physical sustenance and livelihood. And the word for rain in Hebrew is geshem, and it comes from the same root of the word for physicality, which is gashmiut. So we know that most things, plants, vegetation, animals, us, need water to grow. So this is very important, and this is the focus, really. This is the time that we are going to change and start praying for rain at the end of Sukkot. So we want to actualize our prayers, and so the word for water, mayim, when you add in numerology, you can add a 1 for the word itself. So the word for mayim is 90, and when you add a 1 for the word mayim itself, it's 91, and the numerical value of a sukkah is 91. So all of these things are so connected. It's like God is, saying, here I am. It's right there. And so the practice of the pouring of the water on the altar on Sukkot in the morning follows the Simchas Shueva, the drawing of the water festival at night. So we can see so many connections between Sukkot and water. Also, the final sealing of the judgment of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur comes on Hoshana Rabbah. So Hoshana Rabbah this year is Thursday night and Friday. There are many customs. There's a custom to stay up all night and to learn. There's beautiful davening. There's many, many added things that happen on Hoshana Rabbah. You can also read about that on Chabad.org or on any Torah source. And so we still have time to do tshuva. That's the whole thing. We say that the Nihilus service, we're locked in with God, and that's our last. There's never a last opportunity. That's what's so beautiful. There's always another opportunity to do tshuva. So it's symbolic that we're sealing in our judgment when we put down the 4 species, the lulav, the esrog, the myrtle, and there's a certain ceremony at the end of Hoshana Rabbah where we take the willow, a bunch of willows, and 5 bunches of willows, and we pound them on the ground 5 times. All of these, there's so many mystical connections to it. And also, just to conclude on Hoshana Rabbah, it says it's compared to Isaac redigging the wells of water his father Avram had dug, and the Philistines had stuffed up. And so it says on Hoshana Rabbah, it's an opportunity to visit our commitments, our hopes, our prayers, our good intentions that we made over the new year, and to make them living, to compare them, bring them to the source, the living waters, to connect them to their source. And then the end of the 3-week festivities culminates with the holiday of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. And that is when we start asking for rain. We stop reciting the prayer, praising God for causing the dew to descend, and we begin reciting the phrase, who makes the wind to blow and the rain to fall. And this is the official change of the seasons. So I want to go on a little about Shmini Atzeres, but I want to actually dedicate this to my father. So my father, his name, Aaron ben Yosef, and my father's yahrzeit is Simchas Torah. And I want to tell, there are many stories that happened to me that's Simchas Torah, but I want to just begin with telling one story that was very significant. So I knew my father was leaving the world, and my mother and my brother took him home from hospice. And every year for Simchas Torah, my husband and children and I would go to San Francisco. We would go to the Chabad of San Francisco, to the Langer family. And we would, with Mayor Berkowitz from New York, and we would make a big Simchas Torah celebration there. I mean, we did it in Los Angeles for many years, but this is another phase of our life. We did it in San Francisco. And it was just very beautiful. It was very, very special for all of us to be together, and our families drew very close. And I was very torn about whether to go or not, what to do, but I was committed to going. And also I had a very dear friend who was killed in a car accident. She was killed by a drunk woman driver at 10:30. And that was my phone again. And I still haven't mastered my computer. I know I said I would by this week, but it's coming. Mashiach's coming, and I'm going to master my computer. So I had promised one of the children that I would take him with my son. He was best friends with my son, that I would take him to San Francisco for Simchas Torah, and I didn't want to let him down. You know, that was really a motivating force to go, even though I really thought my father would still be alive. The doctor did say he probably would live another few weeks, but I knew that my father was dying. And so I was in San Francisco, and I had given my mother somebody's phone number that lived there in case she needed to get in touch with me. And this friend of ours came over on Simchas Torah morning, and she told me my father had passed away. So I really didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know really to put myself, and we had wonderful friends there. They had a beautiful backyard with absolutely a beautiful sukkah. They had like a mikveh in the middle of their sukkah. I mean, it was just very beautiful. And I went there to sit and be by myself. And I remembered a story that my husband had told that week, or maybe that week a year ago, at some point. And the story came to my mind, and this is the story. And he actually heard the story from this man himself. His name was Asher. I know he had another name. I don't want to say it incorrectly, so I'm not going to say it. But he had been released from Russia, I think, in the late 1960s. He had been in prison camp. He had been in labor camps. He had lived a very, very difficult life of torture in Russia. And he told the following story. He said he was on a work detail, and it was Simchas Torah, and he knew it was Simchas Torah. And the Russian guards in Siberia took him out with the other people, and they had to work very hard, and they were, digging and chopping, but it was Simchas Torah, and he wanted to celebrate Simchas Torah. He wanted to, because Simchas Torah is not about learning. It's not about studying. It's about rejoicing. It's really about dancing and rejoicing and expressing this joy for God and this joy for Torah. And he didn't really know what to do. And he pictured the Rebbe. Now, for him, the Rebbe was, I think, the Rebbe Rashab, which was like 3 Rebbes ago. And he had been in the court of Lubavitch. And he pictured him on Simchas Torah, singing with the Torah. And all of a sudden, an idea popped into his head. And he said to the guards, who were basically, drunken peasants guarding them, he said, I heard you went to town last night. How was it? I heard that you went to they had singing. And they were going, what do you know about singing? What do you know about singing? And he said, singing, I have a great voice. I can sing better than those people in town. You want to hear me sing? They go, okay, sing. And he starts to sing. He has a horrible voice. And he starts to sing the Simchas Torah Niggin, the Chabad Simchas Torah Niggin. And he's singing his heart out. And he's picturing the Rebbe singing. And he has this overwhelming desire that he wants to dance, because dancing is the mitzvah of Simchas Torah. And then he says to the guards, he says, you know what? I also am a great dancer. And they're already laughing because he's a horrible singer. And they said, yeah, let's see. Go ahead, dance. And he said he pictured the Rebbe dancing with the Torah, just dancing and dancing. And he just started to dance with just tremendous joy. And this story came to my mind as I'm sitting there in this state thinking, it's Simchas Torah. It's a time for joy. My father is gone. And how do I move myself from this place of deep sorrow? Because it says in Tanya that a Jew can feel within their heart. One side of their heart can feel weeping, and one side of their heart can feel joy. And I said, it's the mitzvah. How do I move myself? And I was truly blessed to be by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And I saw the Rebbe dancing with the Torah. And I just envisioned seeing the Rebbe holding the Torah and dancing and dancing and dancing with the Torah. And that was my vision on Simchas Torah. And that was, the day that I lost my father. And it was just really, for me, a very deep experience to understand this Russian chassid and take from his celebrating with the Rebbe and move myself to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, to be in his space, so to speak, and to be able to be dancing with joy. So we're going to learn a little about the holiday of Shmini Atzeres and of Simchas Torah. So Shmini Atzeres. So in Eretz Yisrael, it's one day. Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah are the same day. Only in the United States is it two different days. So Shmini Atzeres signifies that God is saying to the Jews, don't go, stay. Your parting is hard for me. And it says this can be compared to a king who says to a beloved friend, let's make a shift, you and I, with whatever we can find. So let's see what the Rebbe says about that. So the 8th day, it is Atzeret, means I am holding you back with me, like a king who invited his children for a banquet for a certain number of days. And when it came time to leave, you don't have to be a king. I feel that way also when my children are going to leave. No, don't leave. Stay another day. Stay another day, Parting is hard for me. Stay a little longer. And that's a sign of affection. And it says that level of parting is hard. It also says, when it says make a shift, let's see what you and I can do together. We talked last week that one of the things of Sukkot was that 70 bulls were offered on Sukkot representing the 70 nations of the world for the benefit, for the blessing, because we want not only ourselves to have a world of healing and peace, we want everybody to have a healing and peace in the world. So it says, but on Shmini Atzeres, only a single bull was offered, relating to the singular nation of Israel. So it says, it's compared again to a king who makes a banquet and for 7 days invites all the people of the country. And when all those people are leaving, the king says to his best friend, stay, we've done our duty, we've taken care of everybody else in the country, and you and I, whatever's left over, we'll eat. We'll have a little fish, we'll have whatever we can find, we'll have together. So it says that God is saying to the Jews, on the 8th day, you shall have an Atzeret. Make a shift with whatever you can find. Stay another day. Stay longer. So it says eventually they're going to part. So what is one day? You know, if you're eventually, what is adding one day in any case? So it says that the special quality of Shmini Atzeres is the day itself assures that there will not be any parting at all. It seems that it's saying your parting is hard for me, not our parting. Why? Because on the part of God, there is no separation. God does not part from us. He's always connected to us. There is always an everlasting bond with the people of Israel, a face-to-face bond. And it says, in any form of separation is only on the part of the Jewish people because they've turned their backs. Okay? So it's your parting. And what leads the nation of Israel to separate from God? It's the separation from one Jew to the other. When there is all of us are in this together. Bless us. When we all are separate, when people are feeling this is for myself, that's when there is a separation. So it says, because Sukkot represents an integral unity among the Jewish people. Here I am in my beautiful, kind of beautiful, tarp sukkah. If I had a little more wood, natural woods, but, I have to raise those natural wood children that could do that. But, it still has a beauty. It has a beauty because of its meaning. And it says that it represents unity, and that unity is a beauty in itself. So we have the 4 species, the lulav, the esrog, the myrtle, and the willow, and those are unity. And all of it joins together to constitute one mitzvah. We say one mitzvah on all those things. So it says that all Jews become like a single band to carry out the will of God. And the joining together is for the mitzvah. It's for the commandment to celebrate the festival. But when the festival is over and when we are re-entering back into our regular everyday life, kind of, there's the possibility for divisiveness. There's the possibility that we separate. And in that separation, God says, your parting is hard for me. So it says, in order to preserve the unity even after the festival, God is saying, let's make a shift with whatever you can find. Let's change it up so that we don't part, that there is this unity that remains. And it says that the unity of the 4 species, that they're not really united because they each retain their separate identity. They are only unified in the context of the mitzvah. So once the mitzvah is over, they are not unified. And they're 4 different species. They're 4 separate species. So that on Shmini Atzeres, however, it is said that we take 1 bull and 1 ram. Not 70, but 1. And this one has this integral oneness that has the ability to keep separate entities bound together. So this also relates to the dancing of Simchas Torah. It says that all Jews, from the greatest to the smallest, from the ones who know how to dance to the ones who can barely dance, all become alike and unified in something that is common to all. That there is no individualization when they dance. There only is this joint dance together, which will be very interesting this year if people are going to be dancing and trying to be separate, maybe to have the meditation and that visualization of how we're really joined together, even though we might not actually physically be that close and joined together. And it says this is true unity, that we're not simply separate entities that come together, but we look for what's similar, we look for what unifies, and we look for what's alike. I know when my children were growing up, l'chaim, that they're all grown up, and we lived in Westwood, California, and we lived next to the Mormon temple, and that there was more in common that my children had with the Mormon kids that practiced their religion, excuse me, than they had with Jewish kids that had, didn't practice their religion. There was a similarity. There was something that they could find that unified them, their belief in God, the fact their mothers made them wear white shirts, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, whatever it is. But they were able to find that level of unity. So it says that if we can find this level of unity, if we could look for what binds us together, then we can preserve this for the whole entire year and remain an instrument of God. We can remain this like a lifesaver of God. So it goes on to say that the dancing on Simchas Torah signifies the unity of all Jews. And also, how do you dance? You dance with your feet, not with your head. But because of the feet, the head dances it as well. So if you were to dance with your head, guided by your rational understandings, joy would be limited to the extent of what you understood. Rejoicing with the Torah is supposed to be unlimited. This is what is called for on this holiday, and that is why we dance with the feet. There's only an awareness of the preciousness of Torah, but not that we have to understand it or study it or be involved in it in any way. Just to dance is enough to bring about unrestricted joy. And I actually am a very serious about dancing on Simchas Torah. I take it extremely seriously. So if I go into a community or a shul and I see people not dancing, I just force them to dance. I'm like that horrible person that's just forcing you to do things you don't want to do until you really like it and are having a good time. So it's a beautiful thing. It's, this year, I don't know, it's going to be different, but you can still dance. You can lift up your hearts, you can lift up your heads. There are many, many ways to do things. And we have to find that way. We're creative, we're all smart, we could do it. So we don't study Torah on Simchas Torah. Woo, that is a relief. You dance, you spend the day dancing. And you dance, and people dance around the Torahs, and it is a tremendous, tremendous celebration. And my husband one year was in Newark, New Jersey. That's where the first Lubavitch Balchuva kind of yeshiva was. My husband came from Yeshiva University to Lubavitch, and he went to this yeshiva in Newark. So on Simchas Torah, they went to a local synagogue, and the people there were mostly old, but there were other, they were the only really young people, and they were dancing to as my husband described it, to like a funeral dirge, when they would step and dance and So my husband was there with 2 or 3 other Bachrim, and they grabbed hands and they started dancing and pulling people into dancing and joy, and they were getting a lot of people excited about dancing. And Shlomo said there was the head rabbi came over. His name was Herr Leiter, and in those days, a lot of the Germanic shuls had very formal looking garments that they wore. And he came over and he yelled at them, and I can't do imitations like my husband could do, but he said, "You will not make of this a dance hall." Like he was like outraged at that outpouring of tremendous joy. I guess he never studied Hasidus and didn't know that this is what you're supposed to do. So it says that when you dance with your feet, it causes the head to dance also. And it's the joy of the simple folk dancing. It's just absolutely joyous. So it says that in this Simchas Torah dancing, we complete the annual reading of the Torah, and we take out the scrolls and we dance, and there is a message. So it says the human body is divided into three parts. There's the head, there's the body, and there's the feet. And each part has another aspect of human experience. So the head represents our intellect and our power of cognition. Our body is the heart, represents the heart that feels and has emotions. And the feet stand for action. So dancing happens when we lift our feet off the ground. And when you lift your feet off the ground, your head goes even higher. So when we practice what we learn, it's symbolic of that our minds are elevated to a higher level. I remember when I first started studying Hasidus, and I was in Minnesota studying with Rabbi Manis Freeman. I remember him saying that on Simchas Torah, that you should dance and sweat as much as you sweated for the sins that you did. So I guess maybe that's why I've made dancing my thing on Simchas Torah, and nonstop dancing and dancing for hours and all night. And so when we used to have the Chabad house here in Los Angeles and Westwood, we could have 900 people on Simchas Torah because no one else was celebrating it in those days. It was the 70s, and it was a new concept, and people would just dance and dance. And then when we went to Berkeley and to San Francisco, and for the last many, many years with my husband, and then in the last few years without him, I've been going to my son in Boston, who has hundreds of young people that come, and we dance and we dance and we dance. And it's really just thrilling. It's really, really just thrilling to participate in that mitzvah and see the joy that people can actually celebrate something beautiful. We're celebrating the Torah, celebrating the beauty of the dancing and the meaning and the deep significance of what Torah is. So we complete the Torah, and we have this tremendous intensity and joy, and we recommit ourselves to draw Torah down into the world. And when we lift our feet and dance, the Torah itself is elevated. And we are really committing ourselves to good deeds and more mitzvahs and things of that nature. So the final words that we conclude the Torah on Simchas Torah, because besides dancing, we also conclude the Torah and we start the Torah again. So, and this alludes to the oneness. Everything we're really doing during this time is about oneness, about wholeness, about bringing unity among the Jewish people. And we need to bring that unity. We all have to be united, one with the other, because that is what will bring peace into the world, and peace for the Jews, and peace to Israel. So it says, why? Because each of us, each Jew is part of the essence. We know this from the Baal Shem Tov, that every particle compounds the total structure. So if you hold one part of essence, you hold the whole thing. So there is this mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew like yourself, which actually means like yourself, because self-love is not dependent on any reason. It is integral to a person, and so the love for the other must be the same way. So how can that be possible if you and the other are two distinct entities? So it follows that you're really one. It's not really that you're two. You're not really loving the other, you're loving yourself, and that other is also you. It's deep and it's complex, and it's extremely hard to achieve. But we can do it in moments, and we can do it in pieces. Because the Baal Shem Tov is saying, Ahavas Yisrael means to love even a Jew whom one has never seen or heard about. And I can only say that it was much more prevalent in the times that I was growing up, when everybody loved Israel. I mean, I grew up very Reform Jewish, but there was just this love of Jews and Israel. It was just ingrained in me from the time I was a young child. And that if, God forbid, there was a terrorist attack or somebody injured in Israel, we all suffered. We actually did feel that pain and suffering. And sad to say, today there's too much divisiveness, too much dismissal. I remember when we first started to go to the holy city of Hebron, and Shlomo and Yosef stayed in Tel Rameda, there were 7 families that lived there. It was the original grounds of King David's palace. And we stayed in, they stayed first, I stayed there another time, in the trailer, they call it a caravan in Israel, of Rabbi Renan. So who is Rabbi Renan? He was a grandson of Rav Kook, who is the very famous chief rabbi of Israel. And he was a tremendous scholar in his own right. And there was a terrorist attack one night, and he was brutally murdered. And I had met him. I was very involved with the community in Hebron. And in the Jewish newspapers here in Los Angeles, tragically, it didn't say Rabbi Renan. It said settler was murdered. Meaning, we can dismiss him. We don't have to feel unity. We don't have to feel one. And that was the first time I saw that. And I really felt it like a knife in my heart, because it changed the way I grew up. Now I'm really involved in my Jewish life. And now there's not that unity that there was when I was younger, and we all felt the pain of each other. And I think that's what we have to strive to get back, is that we have to care and love each other to that degree that each of our lives are very entwined, and it's very important what one has from one to the other. So it means Ahavas Yisrael, again, means to love even a Jew whom one has never seen or even heard about. And this is the foundation of the whole Torah. And it says that this is why the soul has an advantage over the body, because in that place we are one, and there is that connection, and there is that oneness. And that we have to be, we really have to find this way to be part of ourselves. So in the Musaf, which is the additional service, in the silent prayer of the Musaf service, we can say, it says, they will all form a single band to carry out your will wholeheartedly. Meaning, we're joining together for a purpose. And what is the purpose? To carry out the will of God. And it's very difficult because we are distinct, different people. And if you haven't noticed, we all have very different opinions on many, many different things. And that even though we might unite on some things, we still remain individuals. And that kind of unity is temporary. So there are things that people in their lives have united on, and then come to an area of disagreement and disband because there wasn't that overwhelming connection of permanence, meaning based on Torah mitzvahs, based on living by the will of God, based on that unifying factor. So it says there's a metaphor comparing the Jewish people to a single sheep among 70 wolves. Each of the 70 wolves is a separate entity, but the Jewish people are all united, and this will give them strength. So you can stand, like the Maccabees, in the time of the Maccabees, read those stories. The few who were so deeply united were able to win over the many. And it says that we have to be bound up as one on behalf of Torah. And in the beginning, it says, God created. That's how the Torah starts. Because after we finish reading the Torah, immediately we start with in the beginning. And the last parsha that we're reading now, this week, V'zos habracha, and this is the blessing. So it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That a Jew must be aware that the heavens, meaning all spiritual reality, and the earth, all material things, were created by God. And whatever one has was given to them by God, was created by God. And these words, V'zos habracha, this is the blessing that Moses blessed, alludes to the fact that Moses was the shepherd of Israel, and he was their guide. He was the guide. So our sages say that the manna came by virtue of Moses, and even the clouds of glory, which came by virtue of Aaron, and the well of water, which was by the virtue of Miriam, were restored after their passing by the virtue of Moses. Because Moses was the shepherd of Israel, and he's the one who provided the needs materially and spiritually. So it says that, and there is a Moses in every generation. Why not? Okay, I'm going to just tell a brief story about a Moses of the generation, and I'm going to tell it brief because it's a really long story, and if Robin's still on, you'll remember for the next Farbrengen, I'll tell it in detail. But there was a friend of mine who's no longer alive. Her name was Zatara Hasofer, and it's a very long story. I'm not going to go into her long story, but at a period in her life when she lived in Tasmania, and she had been asked, she and her husband had been asked to read the Torah for a Reformed congregation because their Torah reader had died. And they had been living in Israel. They spoke Hebrew fluently, but they had absolutely no interest in reading the Torah. And they said no. And the community begged them, we have no one to read the Torah. Nobody reads Hebrew. So Atara said that they made an agreement that her husband Miko will read the Torah and she will teach a handful of people in the community Hebrew so that eventually they would be able to read the Torah themselves and they wouldn't need them, and they agreed to that. And over a period of 2 years, as she put it, the words of Torah drew them in. And she and her husband both became very interested, but they knew nothing, and they were the ones who knew the most. So there was a book, The Code of Jewish Law, which the first Torah teacher I had said to me once, don't ever read that by yourself. And they were reading it by themselves, and she read, that there's these laws of keeping kosher, and that there are dishes and pots for milk, and dishes and pots for meat. So she took all her dishes and she laid them out and she divided them in half. She said, okay, you are for meat, you are for milk. And then when she would make a mistake, she would just put them away. Finally, she had almost no dishes left, and she was getting more and more frustrated. What should she do? And she said she went down to the sea and she prayed the following. She said, God, I know there was a Moses who led the Jewish people. Please send the Moses of the generation now to lead me. Please, I need the Moses of the generation now. And that was her prayer. And a few weeks later, Rabbi Chaim Gutnick from Australia got a phone call from one of the Rebbe's, Lubavitcher Rebbe's secretaries that said, go to Tasmania. And he said, well, what am I supposed to do in Tasmania? And the secretary said, I don't know. The Rebbe said, go, you go. So he figured he'll go, he'll put up a sign that he's coming to the Jewish community. And there was a sign that put up, Rabbi Gutnick, is coming from Australia. And when he came, I heard this from him. A Tara ran over to him. And she was so excited. And she said, Rabbi, I've been praying for you. And his face turned white. And he never told her till many, many years later, when they were already very involved in living a Jewish life, about the call that he had gotten from the leader of the generation, from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And they were able to inspire hundreds of people in their lives. So it says that Moses was the leader of the generation, just like there is always a Moses in every generation. And it says that he leads the flock, and the flock's desire is to follow the directions of the shepherd. So it goes on to teach in this teaching that it says this is the connection between in the beginning, with and before the eyes of all Israel, because genuine Ahavas Israel means stepping out of oneself, doing for another, and that one can step out of their own reality. So in the beginning, God created as twofold. It says it energizes the spiritual work of all Israel, and it prepares us for in the beginning, for the laws that we're going to have to live by. And on Simchas Torah, we complete the last lines of V'sos HaBrocha, and we start the first lines of the book of Bereshis, and we renew ourselves on high. And it says, what about the people who can't study? What about the one who doesn't study? Not even in their free time. They have a lot of free time. It says they should not lose hope. It says here, and this is so deep, Simchas Torah, we can achieve by joy that same level of tshuva, those same spiritual advancements that we achieved on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur by way of the bitterness of the heart. So it says we have the month of Elul, and then we have the days of Succot, and then we have Rosh Hashanah, and then we have the 10 days of Tshuva, and then we have Yom Kippur, and then we have Ne'ilah. And even if all that time the person wasn't able to accomplish this tshuva, this return, they can still do tshuva on Simchas Torah. How? With tremendous joy. That's all you need. Open your joy floodgates. Be filled with joy. And it's so much more challenging in these times to be filled with joy. And it says that this is possible. And it's possible to start again now during the time of Simchas Torah. And it says from the beginning, everybody likes beginnings. You like to start a diet, January 1st, in the beginning. Everybody loves beginnings. Okay, many of us, not everybody, but many of us have a lot more free time than we used to. L'chaim to free time. L'chaim to free time used well. Really. It's such a blessing, all these opportunities. For anybody who wasn't on in the beginning, I just want to say that Shlomo Katz on the Shlomo Katz Project on Facebook is having everyday teachers in the sukkah and music and dancing. And tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. California time, my daughter Hindela will be one of the teachers. She will teach in the sukkah for Simchas Torah in Israel through the Shlomo Katz project. So I will be there. I mean, watching. I won't be too dressed up, but I will be there. So there's so many opportunities to begin. Let's use this time of year. Let's use this time of Simchas Torah. And it says that God created, it's the creation, it's the time of creation. We know that there are 21 days between Rosh Hashanah and Shmini Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres starts Friday night to Saturday night. Simchas Torah starts Saturday night to Sunday night. It is, if you have lost a parent, a relative, it is Yizkor is said on Shmini Atzeres. Usually Yizkor is said on the second day of a holiday, but because a lot of people drink and frolic and carry on Simchas Torah, on Shmini Atzeres Yizkor is always said. So it's the custom to light a candle. And the blessings for Friday night, I will send them out on an email, are Lahadlik Ner Shel Shabbat V'Yom Tov and Shekianu. So we know it takes 21 days for almonds to ripe from blossoming on an almond tree. And this is the shortest amount of time for a fruit. And it draws down into this world, this spiritual light, this spiritual 21 days, it says, because we have 21 days from Rosh Hashanah to Shmini Atzeres. During those 21 days, there's this drawing down of light in the world. And it says that it's absorbed, it's finally absorbed on Shmini Atzeres. So this light is available, and we can make use of it. It's given to us as a gift, and we can make use of it. And it says, how do we come to use it? We come to use it through joy. That's it. We have to be joyous. You know, it's going to be very hard, but you have to be joyous. So we might come back to something here, but we might not, because I want to do a few more things. Okay, so I don't know. I don't know why I look at my watch, because I'm not really going anywhere. But I feel more official, like in a class. Let me look at the time. Okay, so again, I'm going to repeat some things just because I'm taking from a few different sources, and being on the phone all day with trying to break my daughter out of prison hospital didn't give me a lot of time to put all my work together. Okay. So it says here that we take out all the Torah scrolls from the ark, and they're put on the bima, the podium, and people circle the podium, and this is called hakafos. It's the circling of the podium, and 7 circles are done, and it says that this is according to the Arizal, the 7 circles, and also on Hoshana Rabbah, which is Hoshana Rabbah is not a Yom Tov like Shabbos and Yom Tov where you can't drive and other things are prohibited. It's a regular day, but it's a day with extra prayers and extra blessings are actually said on this day, and it commemorates this. So we go around the bima, and the lulav and the esrog are held, and there are certain things that are said. And it commemorates the 7 times the Kohanim would circle the altar on the day of Hoshana Rabbah. And the mystics explain that the 7 hakafos, the 7 circlings on Simchas Torah, correspond to the 7 circlings that will be done on Hoshana Rabbah. And it says when on Simchas Torah you do these 7 circlings with the Torah scrolls, we're drawing down spiritual energy through them that connect to the 7 different sfirot. So what are the 7 different sfirot? The divine attributes, they're chesed, loving kindness, gevura, severity, tiferes, beauty, strength, is netzach, victory is hod. Strength is, Gevurah is strength, Tiferes is beauty, Netzach is victory. Hod is splendor. Yesod is foundation. And Malchus is kingship. So these are, we're drawing down into the world. So when you dance, even if you dance with yourself in a circle, you're drawing down these divine attributes into the world. That should be your meditation. You know, like, we can have these meditations. We can use all these steps in our own spiritual growth. And also they're connected to the 7 days of creation that for the fulfilling and learning of Torah. So these 7 hakafos, these 7 circlings are represent Torah's permeation into all aspects of creation, because there's many things that have to do with 7. There's 7 colors of the rainbow. There's 7 years of Shemitah, etc., etc. Okay, so that's a few things about circling. Also, it says all reserve is taken away in the joy of Simchas Torah. You can draw from hidden levels of joy that you didn't even know that you have. You know, you can just dance with abandon. You can dance with that freedom and that joy of dancing with the Torah, because this happiness comes from Torah. And the Torah is never open. This is not about learning. This is not about studying. This is not about like intellectual delights and, you know, enjoyments. The Torah is held wrapped up. And normally we study Torah, but now we sing and we dance, and it has nothing to do with understanding. Because it says intellect is not the only way that we can connect to Torah. One dimension of Torah can be grasped by the mind, but there's another dimension that's infinite, beyond our comprehension, and this is the essence. And it says God, the essence of God and the essence of Torah are one. So just like God is infinite and God transcends bounds and limitations, so Torah goes beyond the finite mind of understanding. And this is why our ancestors said, we will do and we will listen. Because that was a super rational commitment to God, to God's will, and and we can achieve this by dancing. Does that sound fun? So that when we garb the Torah in intellectual categories, it shows that it's the outreach of God to man. But on Simchas Torah, man reaches out to God, and he does that through dancing, connecting to this aspect of oneness with God, stepping out of the restrictions of one's own rational mindset. And this is what happens when we dance with the Torah. I can't emphasize enough what it means to dance with the Torah. And we're all equal. Learned, unlearned, good dancers, bad dancers, that there is not a difference between people. When you join in a circle, there's no beginning and end. Okay, so this year, if you're going to be around other people, we're going to have, I don't know if anybody saw, like months ago, there was a clip on the internet of some Hasidim at a simcha, maybe a wedding or something like that, and they were doing line dancing, and they had chairs in between them, and they were holding the chairs for the correct distance. But we want that circle distance, and we have to be careful. I mean, it's not to disregard the laws and the rules and the practices of safety, but we are creative people, and you can find a way to dance, and you can find your own little space to dance. And even though it's not about individual dancing, even though really it's about joining together and dancing, maybe with this year we can be joining in our intention, joining in our meditation with a group before we start, and having our own places to do that dancing. And the previous Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, said that on Simchas Torah, the Torah itself wants to dance. But, tough luck, Torah scroll has no feet, so a Jew has to do that for him. Because a foot has no independent will. It's subservient to the head that controls it. And we become the feet of the Torah. And the feet, what are the feet associating with? marching forward, going forward. So it says that just like the feet can bring the head to a place it cannot reach alone, it says the Jewish people have the ability to elevate the Torah and bring its essence to the service. So that the holidays begin Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and they focus on our inner core relationship with God, but Simchas Torah is the climax. And it's their transition between the intense spiritual experience that we've had in the month of Tishrei and our down everyday circumstances. And we come to realize that God, Israel, and the Torah are one, and it's a preparation for our divine service the whole year. And it's our preparation for bringing joy into our lives this whole year. That we have to, this is our baskets of joy. We're pulling from our baskets of joy, and you know, we can all do it. We all have the ability to do that drawing down. Let's see what it has to say here. It says that on the 8th day, which is Shmini Atzeres, we move from our sukkah, we move out of our sukkah into our homes with joy. So it says here that on Sukkot, the spiritual influence on Sukkot, I'm sitting in my beautiful sukkah, you feel it. And it says that there is something called an encompassing light. Just like a sukkah surrounds a person at a certain distance, but it says on Shmini Atzeres is the time that it comes in, that it's absorbed into the soul. And this is why we move from the sukkah back to the house, from a temporary dwelling to a permanent one, because we're showing now that it's all been absorbed, that we've absorbed it, and now we can use it and go forward. And it says that the activity is to absorb this light and to absorb this energy of the day, of this time, and to bring this level of joy into our lives. I'm going to skip that. Let me just see. No, not that page. Okay. I write down my pages, and I'm becoming more efficient. Okay, so it goes on to say here that Shmini Atzeres and Rosh Hashanah are comparable in many matters of mystical devotions and higher unifications. For those Kabbalah people, sounds great. On Rosh Hashanah, it's a mode of elevation, and on Shmini Atzeres, it's drawing down from above. You're drawing them down, and you're absorbing it into your soul, into your very essence and being. It says the service of Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, is joy. Pure and simple. The joy of a mitzvah for the whole year is generated by Simchas Torah. And it says the rejoicing of Simchas Torah is a cure for all types of illness. It opens the heart and the mind so that a person can come to do tshuva. So we can do tshuva through the regret and the bitterness and the clapping during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but we can also do tshuva by this tremendous level of joy, by opening ourselves to joy, to dancing with joy. So, that again, it says on Rosh Hashanah, the mitzvah is the shofar, on Yom Kippur it's fasting, and on Simchas Torah, the mitzvah of the day is rejoicing. And this is within everybody's grasp. This joy is within everybody's grasp. And I want to share a few more words. Okay. So here we are, the mitzvah to be joyous. It says about Sukkot 3 times it says there's a mitzvah to be joyous. And the joy of the Torah means that there is a deeper level of joy on Simchas Torah than even the joy that we have on Sukkot. So on Sukkot, I've been joyous the whole Sukkot, except for being a little tortured by that experience I talked about in the beginning, but pretty joyous all on Sukkot. But Simchas Torah leads us even to a deeper level of joy. And it says that Simchas Torah and Shmini Atzeres even go above the natural level of joy. And it takes, sometimes most of the time it's a choice. Most of the time it's a choice. Unless you're, just born smiling. A lot of times you have to make a choice to be filled with joy and to have an outlook of joy, that it's a skill. Somebody says, oh, you're just a happy person. That's not true for people. A lot of people who have worked on it, they're making a choice. They're moving more in that direction. So it says here that Simchas Torah is giving us a major lesson. At the end of the day, we have a choice to make. Do we want to be happy or don't we want to be happy? And being happy is a decision, because many people have many challenges in life, many people. And we decide that we want to put a smile on our face. That's what we decide. And you will see, when you have a smile on your face and you walk down the street, you'll elicit many, many smiles back. And imagine what that can do for a person who's not feeling so good. And it says that the secret of God is for those who are in awe of God. It's from the Psalms. And it says that the secret of God for those that are in awe of God numerically equals 353, which is the same value as the word simcha. So it's all connected. All of this is connected. 1 second. So the Midrash is teaching us the Torah that was given to Moses is what we call black fire on white fire, meaning black letters written on white parchment. But on Simchas Torah, we don't talk about Torah study. We don't emphasize it. So instead we dance. So it's as if it were with the white fire that we're dancing, that all of these things are waiting to be revealed, and it's connecting us in a very, very profound way. We dance in circles, hours and hours and hours and hours. I remember once when my son Yosef, who is now 39, was 4 years old, and I was staying in Crown Heights for Simchas Torah, and he went at night with, my husband stayed always in California making Simchas Torah for other people at Chabad and for hundreds of people, but I went occasionally to New York. And Yosef went with our friend Mayor Rhodes and to shul. And somehow he got left there all night because he went and he sat near the Rebbe, and he was 4 years old, and the Hasidim were dancing. And I used to not go at night because it was just too crowded to even get in the shul, but I would go very early in the morning. And that's really the way, when I told that story about seeing the Rebbe dance with the Torah, I would go like at the crack of dawn early in the morning, and I would be in the front row, and I was always able to see the Rebbe. And Miriam and I are walking to 770 to shul, and it's like 5:30 a.m. in the morning, and we see Yosef, little 4-year-old Yosef, with Rabbi Izzy Kogan, the Tzaddik of Leningrad, coming back from shul, walking back to Miriam's house to sleep. So it was an exciting time for hours and hours and hours. The Hasidim danced, even a little 4-year-old. whose mother just left him in Brooklyn in the shul, and c'est la vie, he turned out well. So it says the act of dancing at the beginning of the year gives us this promise of joy and trust and faith that the new year will bring to us joy, not only as Jews, but also individually. And it says in one of the most climatic moments of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we say tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, repentance, prayer, and charity have the ability to nullify a negative degree. But we also say that the holidays of Sukkot and Simchas Torah teach us that joy has the power to nullify a negative decree and allow a new year to begin. So again, joy, joy, joy. So there's a story, because in Sukkot, in Shmini Atzeres, we switch the prayers and we change for the prayer in Musaf. From requesting dew, we're praying for rain. So we're no longer saying God is the one who makes the dew fall. We're saying that he makes the wind blow and the rain fall. So there's a Baal Shem Tov story that's told that the Baal Shem Tov would first, when they would transition in this prayer, the Baal Shem Tov would first make a dismissive motion with the back of his hand, as if he was pushing something away. And then he would utter the phrase, who makes the wind to blow, and he would lift his hand high above his head and make a pulling motion as if to draw something down, while uttering the phrase and the rain to fall. And everybody had their own interpretation, but here is what it was. He said that the Hebrew word for wind is ruach. It has the same Hebrew root as the word for spirituality, which is ruchnius. And the Hebrew word for rain, which is geshem, has the same Hebrew root with the Hebrew word for materiality, which is gashmius. So the Baal Shem Tov was asked, then what did it mean when you made all those hand motions? He explained he was conveying the following message. We have spent enough time on prayer and spirituality. That was his motion of pushing away when he said, who makes the wind to blow? The time has now come to bring all these prayers, hopes, and dreams into the world of physical reality. And that was the motion of drawing down when he was reciting the rain to fall. So he said that his teaching is emphasizing that physicality is not the opposite of spirituality. It's a state in which the fruits of our spiritual work can be integrated into our actual real lives. And the Baal Shem Tov taught his followers that to be concerned not only with the spiritual health and well-being of their communities, but with their livelihood, with their health, and with their overall living conditions. And he says that one known Hasidic Rebbe said that another person's physical concerns should be a matter of your spiritual concern. So I just want to say, for whoever would like to be involved with a good deed based on a longing that someone has, I received a phone call a few weeks ago from a woman who I don't remember meeting, but she was here once for a Shabbos, brought by a friend a while ago, and she and her husband live very far away from Los Angeles. They live 5-hour drive from Los Angeles in a place near Mammoth Lakes, and she has a 2-year-old and she's pregnant with twins. And she called me because her husband during COVID lost his job, and they're Israeli, they're from Israel, and she didn't know what to do about having one of the twins as a boy circumcised. So I took it upon my community to be able to have the moil go, which is going to be a 10-hour round trip drive, and whatever fee is paid to the moil, and to do the bris for them, because they're having now basically 3 babies and no money and no support. So if anybody would like to help, don't hesitate to let me know about it, okay? Because I want it to be a communal mitzvah, not my mitzvah. I want it to be that all of us together, whoever would like, can help bring this beautiful child into the covenant of Israel at a time that it's very difficult for this family. So I just want to conclude with a story and something about hakafos. So when we prepare for the hakafos, which is the circling around the bima with the Torahs, there are verses called atah hareso, are read, and there are different verses. There are 17 verses, and they parallel the verses recited before the blowing of the shofar. So it says that 17 is the numerical value of the word tov, or good. And we know that there is no other good than Torah. So each of these 17 verses contribute to the appreciation and the preciousness of Torah. So in many synagogues, that's why I brought up the tzedakah at this moment, in many synagogues, it is the custom that before each of these atah hareso, there are 17 phrases, they auction off the different phrases and the carrying of the Torah, and they auction them off for money. And so the Simchas Torah Eve that my father had, of the Simchas Torah my father passed away, I was sitting in a synagogue in San Francisco that the Langer family was helping revive. It was a synagogue of very old Jews. It's called Chevra Tehillim at the time. I think it's now revitalized and it's still called Chevra Tehillim, but at that time it was a very small community of mostly old people. So they weren't going to want to rock and roll too long at night, so we went to help them make their simcha, and then we were going to go back to the Chabad house and have a big to-do, big dancing and feasts and everything. So it came to be that they were going to auction off all at once. Instead of doing each individual verse, they were going to auction off the saying of all who would say the first atah hareso. And they started bidding. And somebody, so it's a shul, it's a traditional shul. The men are on one side, the women are on the other side. And the rabbi said, I think Rabbi Langer said, the women can bid also, and you'll give the honor to who you want to be carrying around the Torah on that verse. So I happened to look at the clock, only because Shlomo wasn't in shul yet, my husband, and I was wondering, why isn't he here? Where is he? And there was a clock in shul, and that's the only reason I kept glancing at the clock. So I decided that I would bid, and I would give it to Yosef Langer, if I got it, and I bid a significant amount of money for it. And I looked at the clock at that time, looking around if Shlomo was there, and I just looked at the clock again, so I knew what time it was. And somebody outbid me. And then I just, in my mind, I said, I'm going to give this, instead of to Chevra Tehillim, I'm going to give this to the Chabad house in honor of my friends that are there. And then Shlomo came and the whole festivities went on. And after that, I found out that the exact time of my father's death was the exact moment when I had given that tzedakah. And in my mind, I had said, I knew my father wasn't going to have a complete healing, but I said this is in honor also of my father, and it was at that exact moment. What does it mean? I don't know, but it certainly brought me a tremendous amount of comfort during that time. So learn what these blessings are. I'm going to read the meaning of some of them in conclusion. So it says, the Lord will give strength to his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace. You have been shown to know that the Lord is God. There is nothing besides him. When the Holy One gave the Torah, he opened the seven heavens. Just as he split the upper realms, he split the lower realms and revealed that he is Yahid, that he is one. And it says that the only true existent entity is God, the oneness of God that has an effect on the Jew. And this enables us to carry out the will of God. So, and it makes it impossible to transgress God's will. So we end with saying from the Baal Shem Tov that everything a Jew sees or hears must serve as a lesson in the service of God. So I just want to wish everybody a very good Yontif. I just want to repeat, tomorrow morning, if you want to, the Shlomo Katz Project at 6 a.m. California time to watch Hindala. I'm sure it will be recorded. Also, for anybody in Los Angeles, my email is olivia@chaicenter.org, or my phone number. You can text me. If you want to come to have a piece of honey cake, to have a glass of wine, to shake the lulav and esrog in my sukkah, Thursday I will be available all day. There are a few time slots taken. That's why I want people to email me first, so we won't have more than 2 or 3 people. And if you only want to be one person, if that's how careful you want to be, then just let me know that. And we'll have all day Thursday and Friday. If you haven't had a chance yet to be in a sukkah and say a blessing, please take advantage. I live in the West Side. I have a lovely sukkah. And I just want to say l'chaim to everybody, l'chaim. And I want to thank everybody for coming to class. And again, I want to say, whoever needs a healing should have a complete healing, and we should really use this time of Simchas Torah to draw joy, really to draw joy, to bring ourselves to some level of being joyful. And here's a tip for those who don't know how to do it. Do something for somebody else. Bring joy to another person. Call somebody who's alone. Ask your neighbor to light Shabbos candles. Just bring more light into the world. So thank you everybody for coming and being in my sukkah with me tonight. And I will see you next week. Okay, bye-bye.